everyone. Welcome to Console Room 2020, Satellite 9. I am Miss Shannon, here with two of my really good friends. And what we are going to do right now is this is a pre recorded panel. So thank you for joining us virtually. You'll be able to see all of us in person as well. But we're glad everybody that's home, stay safe, stay healthy. We're glad that you're still being part of this community. This panel itself is The Future is Female. And so I'm very happy to be joined by two of my fantastic human being friends from console rooms of this year and previous years. In case you wonder who I am, I'm Miss Shannon. I'm a comedian, voice actor, speaker, and all around geek that hubs out of the Twin Cities here in Minnesota. And I'm joined by Natasha. Natasha, tell everybody what you do with Console Room in general, because you're part of the reason why we even have a console room and keeps running.
Thank you. I'm Natasha Krentz. I have been attending Console Room all of the years it's existed. Just about half of that time, I've been part of the convention committee, or as we refer to them, the CONCOM.
Mhm.
Um, I help with the dealer's room, I help with operations, and the last 2 years, I've been helping with the virtual online streaming experiences. So I've learned a lot about that in the last 2 years.
Well, thank you for being part of the front of the camera part of this panel, because we know that you're the reason why all of these panels get recorded and actually are able to be shared with everybody out there. So thank you for joining us actually on the mic today. And speaking of someone who I have had the honor of sharing the mic, the dais, the stage, all kinds of things with, Mr. T. Aaron Cisco. Now, Taylor, tell everybody the long list of accolades and why
Ah,
you're so much a part of our community here.
Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, I don't know about accolades. Got a few awards here. I'm a television producer by training, but an author by trade, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. I think for this panel in particular, I have written and covered in my media days a lot of non-male personalities and a lot of non-male issues and some things specifically related to women and some things specifically related to trans women and just the non-male side of things. As an author, I've written, it'll be 10 books coming up just a little bit. My next one's coming up. But of those 10 books that I've written, only one has a non-male or has a male protagonist.
Mm.
The other nine feature strong female protagonists. Uh, been a huge fan of female or women characters since as long as I remember my first fandom was Wonder Woman.
Right.
Way back, a lot longer ago, like to think about, and then from Wonder Woman, I migrated to Punky Brewster, and yeah, and Tank Girl, of course, can't forget Tank Girl. Uh, but absolutely, I'm just a geek who watches a lot of movies and is a really big fan of strong women, both in fiction and meat space.
Fantastic. I think that as we're having this conversation, we have gotten to the point in the last 2 years, we'll say, where we've had some blockbusters that were based upon strong female characters. And that was something that we clearly were lacking over the last few decades, I think, of that all of us got to actually pick the things that we consume. Like, I'm not going back to what our parents were telling us, you got to go watch this. Um, do you think that we have done a good enough job of having enough opportunities in the market with strong female characters that we are being able to tap into that there's enough films that they can say this film is allowed to do well. If this film doesn't do well, it's not because it's a female driven film, or do we still need more properties made to be able to get to that level? What do you both think?
I think that we definitely need more made, but we're finally seeing progress that even people like me who aren't very involved in the industry can see.
Hmm.
Like there's um I know that Black Widow came out and we've been waiting for that for years, and some people are like, "Yes, finally we have a pure female film on the Marvel side," and others reacted to it with, well, that's not what we were expecting it to be, but it was still good.
Right.
Um, and we've had other shows like the couple of Wonder Woman films that have come out in the last couple of years that there's also mixed feelings about. And we finally get to see the woman be the lead of the story instead of just being a part of the story, and it feels good, even
Hmm.
if people don't end up liking it.
Right.
No, I absolutely agree. I think we're making some progress, but I think the fact that we still refer to certain genre films as, oh, this is the female action movie. This is like, oh, it's a woman superhero. It's by having that sort of like disclaimer at the top, still, in my opinion, means that we have a long way to go. You think back, just wow, it's been 5 years now, but 2016 they did the Ghostbusters,
Right.
but that's not how it's referred to. Even though
No.
that's the title, everyone says, "Oh, it's the lady Ghostbusters, it's the girl Ghostbusters, the women Ghostbusters."
Mhm.
Even though, not for nothing, compared to the other three films in that franchise, 2016's Ghostbusters was the best. It's the most solid story. It's got the best, most all-around cast. When you got Kate McKinnon and Leslie Jones and just chewing scenery up there. I mean, that was a fantastic film. But because it happened to feature four leads who weren't guys,
Mhm.
that became the thing everyone kind of focused on. Even with Black Widow, who's at the time of her movie release is what she'd been part of the MCU for at least a decade, if not a little bit longer, almost 15 years. It was still like, oh, can Black Widow, can we have a female superhero movie? It's like, of course we can. But I think that the fact that we still have to kind of like, it's almost like a disclaimer
Right.
or something. Like no one would say that Muhammad Ali is a great black boxer.
Right.
He's just a great boxer. No one would say that like Michael Jordan or Tony Hawk. Tony Hawk is like a really great tall skateboarder. Like
Mhm.
no, you just say, oh, he's a great skateboarder. So I think when we get to the point where we can just say like, oh, this movie is this or this movie's good, and that movie also so happens to feature strong female characters in both leading and supporting and antagonizing roles, I think that's when we'll have sort of made it.
Mhm.
But we are definitely, I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer, but we are getting better. It's a lot better than it was. I just think that we still have that ways to go.
Right. And I to add into that comment, and I agree with you. The films that you mentioned, like the Ghostbusters, I thought it was fantastic and did not get enough eyes on it because of the way that it was presented. And that brings me to what my part of this conversation, my dovetail onto what you both said, is that I do think that yes, we see this even more impacted in geek culture, that female driven properties are not funded and people are very leery of them. But I do think that in general, female driven properties, even outside in the mainstream media, still concern people. They go, oh well, women aren't going to watch it. Now it's interesting that they'll say that women are willing to watch male driven properties, and for that reason, and they'll lean into it. But they go, well, men aren't going to watch this thing if it's a woman driven thing. And so I find that very frustrating because it just so much leans into the continual men aren't allowed to like this and women aren't allowed to like that. So instead of going, just make a good movie, and if it's a good movie, it doesn't matter whether it's a female lead, it's still a good movie out there. And so, Taylor, I know that you are one of my least toxic male friends. You do a
Oh,
fantastic job, and a fantastic job. But how do we communicate that from a societal level? That these female driven properties are things that men can consume and enjoy just as much as something that we go, well, we made this for men.
oh, and that's the million-dollar question, right?
Mhm.
I think one of the things that we're doing well, and by we I mean like collectively, both in geekdom and outside of it, is by kind of pulling the curtain back on how the production process gets made, because we are seeing a lot more women producers, a lot more women editors and directors. I mean, you think of one of the most like stereotypical like guy-centric filmmakers, like Quentin Tarantino. Well, his
Yes.
editor has been a woman since he did Pulp Fiction back in 90, whatever that was, way back. And
Right.
she's the one, and the way filmmaking works, like directors just show up on set, they shoot what they shoot. The editor is one who actually puts it all together.
Right.
And so basically all these folks who say they love like Tarantino's like a guy's guy, these are guys' films, like those are actually films that were created by women. You talk
Hmm.
about um Star Wars. I mean, I think Kathleen Kennedy, her name is now getting out there more, but just by kind of pulling the curtain back and saying, actually, these films that you like, it's not because there's a guy in this role or a woman in this role, or even getting away from that binary, but just sort of
Right.
by it almost feels like a secret sort of. And then also there's the subtlety. So like I'm wearing a t-shirt of one of my favorite movies, Hocus Pocus.
Hmm.
Hocus Pocus is a hardcore female driven movie.
Right.
Like it's about three women who are kind of bad. I mean, well, they try to eat children, so they're really bad. And then, but even like the main characters, the three kids, there's
Yes.
Thora Birch, and then the two other actors, the one woman and the kid, the guy. The guy is the idiot.
Mhm.
Like he's the one who, spoiler alert for like a 30-year-old movie, he's the one who lights he lights the black candle that brings the witches back. He's the one who keeps like messing things up. And then his little sister and then the girl he has a crush on, they're the ones who actually save everything.
Right.
Uh, but it wasn't pushed out. Hocus Pocus is just seen as like a family film or a Halloween movie. But
Yes.
it's like these, it's so saturated with women. And I think the marketing too was just sort of like, hey, if you want to laugh and see Bette Midler like just chewing scenery, come check this out.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big part of it too, is that again that behind the scenes, that business side, when you're getting people who are making the films and making the properties, but then also, as I kind of try not to ramble, but the people who promote the films and package them.
Right.
Um, and I don't want to dominate too much time, but just one example of that would be something like Jennifer's Body. No, I'm
Yeah.
not a fan of that movie. It's not my taste. It's fine. But the way it was packaged was that it was going to be like this sexy slasher horror movie, and it really wasn't. It was almost like a black comedy, but it was from definitely a woman's perspective. It was written by Diablo Cody. It had Amanda Seyfried and I forget the lead actor's name, but she was in it also. Someone
Right.
who played Jennifer, and it's a decent movie. It just wasn't like, because I went into it thinking, oh, this is going to be cool. We're going to watch a slasher movie, and it was not a horror movie. But they packaged it as like this is like a teeny bopper, kind of like a Friday the 13th sort of
Right.
thing. And I think that's the same thing that happens with a lot of films where they say, well, we're going to make this. This is it's for women, or
Yes.
this isn't for you.
Right.
And I think that well no, because no movie's for any one demographic. If it's a good story and it's got good performances and good visuals, that's kind of for everyone. So why don't you let the audiences decide?
Right. I also think that we are still at a point with our female and female presenting driven properties that we need to, like, certain people in the industry have continued to go, I'm going to fight for this, and how do we support them? And as an example, I'll use Jennifer Lawrence in Don't Look Up. As we are recording this, it's actually New Year's Eve. So hopefully a number of people have already seen Don't Look Up by the time you're actually viewing this. We know it's one of the most, I'll say, polarizing films at this time right now when we're recording on Netflix right now. It's definitely a thing. If you haven't seen it, you're going to either love it or you're going to hate it, because you're either on the side of what this movie talks about or you're not. That's just real talk. But one of the conversations that was had regarding this film was who was going to get top billing. Was it going to be Jennifer Lawrence or Leonardo DiCaprio? And Jennifer Lawrence was the one who lobbied for the fact that she should have lead billing on it. And Leonardo DiCaprio agreed because he's Leonardo DiCaprio. But the other thing I thought was interesting is that then when it came out, and they both made a very reasonable, gigantic pile of money for being in this film. But Leonardo DiCaprio did get paid more. And Jennifer Lawrence, I appreciated her statement on it because I thought it was very pragmatic. Because she's like, well, yes, we would like to get to the point that equal pay, or if I'm more, I should get more money. But I do understand that even in this kind of film, Leonardo DiCaprio is a bigger draw than I am. And so to be able to have the presence to say, yes, I understand, but I'm still going to work for change. I really appreciate it for Jennifer Lawrence, because she could have just said, I don't want to be controversial. I'm going to cash my check and not worry about it, and it doesn't matter. But the fact she's like, no, I'm in the movie more technically. My name should be first. And that is something that I think that we have been able to have more of in recent years than before. When it wouldn't have even been a question, if she asked about it, they would have said, why don't you just sit down and quit causing drama? And it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been something that they followed through on. But the reason that they were able to do it is because people have been so outspoken and outspoken and outspoken about it. And it's just a little frustrating that we're all the way to 2022 and still having to have that discussion.
I haven't seen that yet. In fact, I hadn't even heard about it until I saw people posting on Facebook that you got to check this out. It's great. So I don't even know what the storyline is yet, but I will hopefully watch it before we get to console room. Your first question about have we done enough? Is there enough coming up? I mentioned that I think that it's definitely progressing because we're seeing more in the
Mm-hmm.
Netflix space, in the theater space. I've noticed a lot more spin-offs or movies that the title is a female name.
Right.
I know recently there was a new version of Emma that was made. I don't remember what year. Um, there's been over the last 5 or so years the TV series of The Crown and Victoria, and those are more focused on quote unquote real life. Um, but they're actually looking at the female's life and all that surrounded it. And I think that's very cool. And these are things that are being more common.
Right.
Um, one of the shows that I watched the last 2 years, um, and I love the most recent season of the most, I love how they worked the pandemic into it, is Dear White People.
Hmm.
And that's almost solidly about the female characters, in my opinion.
Hmm.
But really, it's about all of them, and there's like 10 of them that are the main characters, and um, it's very strong.
Do you think that we are getting more of that? Like, I can think of more properties where the primary character may be male, but every other character is female, or the all of the supports. And an example that I'll use of that is I'll kind of go into Hawkeye, because yes, we're following Hawkeye around, but then it's about Kate Bishop and it's about Yelena and these other people that are there as well. And I see that happening as well, where at least the the it's almost like instead of having one, they it's still watered down, because but at least we'll have five other women that are in the film, instead of it being like we're so accustomed to with the Avengers. It'll be all men and one woman. So I'm fine with them building more teams, even if you can't give me a completely a female driven film, but you can give me there's a lead, but the entire support is more balanced. I'd be comfortable with that too, just giving more screen time overall to females. And I think it's similar to something you said a couple of years ago, Taylor, that having enough characters of color or characters from a community that they can just be the normal people, or the ones that aren't like, there doesn't have to be, they're there for a purpose. And I would like to see that too, that there's so many women in it that it's like, well, of course the ship captain was a woman and this person was a woman, and you didn't have to sit there and go, oh well, they just tacked her in because we didn't have a woman in this scene.
I think to piggyback off that too, it also works in the one, I agree, but
Mhm.
I think it also works to add to that in the inverse. When one of the biggest changes I've noticed in the last few years is that when we do have like just the one woman in the lead cast as like a primary supporting role or like a co-lead, they're actually giving her something to do. She's not just the girl anymore. I think an excellent example where it was like so blatantly contrasted would be the Justice League film, which
Yes.
wasn't released in 2021, but we got the Snyder cut. So
Correct.
if you compare the first cut, which I think was Josh Whedon, was
Hmm.
Stinson effects, and then the Snyder cut. No, one, yeah, the Snyder cut is substantially longer because he put in stuff, but then you start thinking about why are these the things that Whedon cut out? And I'm not gonna like crap all over Josh Whedon. That could be a whole other panel.
But
But
you're allowed, yeah.
yeah,
Just take it
that
easy.
could be but the like Wonder Woman is the only substantial woman in Justice League. She's the only
Right.
woman in the Justice League as we know it in these films. I mean, you've got Lois Lane, you've got Martha Kent, but they're way in the background. So it's just picking up
Absolutely
the
support. Yes.
superheroes. And in the Whedon cut, Wonder Woman is kind of like she's the babysitter, she's the mom, the den mother. She's there for laughs and to kind of like shake her head, like, "Oh, you boys,"
And then when
in
she does get
essence.
agency, then Superman comes in and like beats
Right.
after Batman mansplained that she should be in charge of everything. I was like, you and your batsplaining is killing me. But I agree with you, Taylor, that it was very frustrating the way that they did it in that ensemble, because it didn't
Right.
need to be that way. Mhm.
Especially because then you look at the Snyder cut and you're like, oh, they actually fleshed her character out. She had all three dimensions that we saw in the Jenkins films, and it's like this is Wonder Woman again. She wasn't
Right.
just window dressing or a token. And similarly in the DC universe with Suicide Squad, I mean, Margot Robbie is basically their Robert Downey Jr. for
Yes.
DC. Like you
Mhm.
throw her in a picture, people will go see it because no
Right.
matter how questionable the rest of the film is, you know you're going to get a good performance from
And
Harley Quinn.
hmm.
Um, I mean, Marvel, they're working on their balance, but I think like with Shang-Chi and the
Yes.
Legend of the Ten Rings, it's
Mhm.
like we had a handful of women on screen, named roles. They're all different. None of
Yes.
them were there for window dressing. Like Aquafina is hilarious, and she
Yes.
does that role well. But then you also had his mom, who was
Correct.
a complete badass, and you have all these like, and his aunt. And I'm sorry, I don't remember all the characters' names,
Exactly.
but it's
But I agree
but
with you. You're right. That when
there's
they showed up appropriately. There wasn't
right.
a point where you're going, are they, you didn't see them have to earned their mantle. It was just presumed that they had done that, and there was a reason why they were in charge and what they were doing. And I think that Shang-Chi did do a good job with their female characters in a similar way that Black Panther did, because it was really just these female characters are inherently together and strong and this, and aren't continually being questioned about who they are. They just who they are, and nobody is looking at them going, well, you know what, are you above your station, are you this, are you that. It's just a given that these are the characters and why they are already in that position. When we are back to situations like what we a lot of why we're here for Concert Room in the first place is the way that we love our Doctor Who franchises. What do we, if we go back to, did we set up Jodie Whittaker for success? Did the fandom, did the producers, did we set up this character to do well? What do you think, Natasha and Taylor?
My instant gut reaction is 50-50.
Okay.
Um, I I have loved seeing a female be the doctor. It has been great. Um, but the stories have caused me to hiccup.
Okay.
And the one that comes to mind most of, wait, what was that episode about, is the one with the frog.
Okay. Yeah.
What
Hmm.
what what was that?
Right.
Was that really the best you could do for this actor, no matter
Right.
who the actor was?
Agreed.
So I think it's been like 50-50. Yes, the story of Doctor Who and the character automatically gave it a lot of potential. Um, did the writing and the producing support that? Yes, I think it did, but it also took a little waves to
Hmm.
get there. Did the fandom support it? I think that's more of a 75-25,
Yeah.
but not super visual. Like, I think that most of the fandom definitely supported this happening, but we didn't necessarily see it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I like that. Taylor?
Ooh, as far as set her up for success, I like that ratio. So I will say it's more like a 90-10,
Okay.
maybe 91-9, because there's so many little things. Like, so Jodie has been the doctor for about as long as Billie Piper was Rose. We got to learn, in my opinion, we know so much more about Rose, and Rose is so better developed as
Mm.
a companion than Jodie Whittaker was as the doctor.
Fair
And I
enough.
think there's a lot of things, like the writing is definitely, whew, that could be a panel by itself, but not the strongest stories in the new Who
Mhm.
era. Um, but there are these little things that kind of set her up to be chipped away at.
Yeah.
Like when you're going to introduce a new doctor, tradition has it that the previous companion kind of comes along to sort of be that continuing thread. So
Yes.
by starting with not one, but in the first episode, four new companions,
Right.
and then you lose a companion, and then you continue on with three more. Well, that we have to develop all these characters, which is not bad. That's good writing, but that means
It gives
less
us less
time
time. Yes.
exact to learn about Jodie. Because I mean, everyone connects with the doctor because you get to learn the doctor. So when you have your favorite doctor, there's something about the way they react to things, their personalities. There's something about that character that you connect to. And I feel like it took a really long time, or much longer, to find that with Jodie,
Right.
because we had so little time, because they had to do so much to keep all these characters going. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like 13 is, aside from 7, 13 is my favorite. I mean, 7 was my first, will
Hmm.
always be there,
Yeah.
but it's like 7 then 13. But I think with a different showrunner, some better stories, and a smaller cast, like you can
Uh,
always expand it. But off the get-go, if it was Jodie plus Billy, and I know Phil Potts was take, but like any one companion and giving her that first, and then start adding on, or just Jodie and Yaz, or just
yeah.
Jodie and Grant, just doctor plus companion, and then adding on after we get to know them, after we have established that base. I think that would have been much stronger. And then of course, like, oh man, some of the stories, Like I get it, Broadchurch, it's good. Chibnall, he's a accomplished writer, but I don't know what's going on with some of those early stories and some of the more recent ones too.
Right.
Not bad. All Who is good Who, but who definitely. I don't think they'll be on any of the top 50 lists anytime soon.
A lot of my frustrations really blend into what some of the things you both said, but specifically, Taylor, them having so many companions made me go, well, you don't trust that people are able to envision themselves in Jodie Whittaker's doctor. So you're putting in all these other characters so it can go, oh, well, if you don't see yourself as her, you can have this person, and then there's this and there's that. When I think that as a fandom, at least those of us who've been watching it since we were little kids, have gotten very accustomed to here's how I imagine myself into that particular frame in that universe. So I think it didn't give us enough credit as fans of the show that they could stop holding my hand by providing, no, here's your template so you know where you land. I'm like, I could figure this out on my own. And I would have been more happy with putting that effort into, as you said, less characters and being able to develop those characters. So as we move forward into other franchises, I know that we've thrown out, are we going to have a full James Bond that's a woman? Well, now we've said, well, maybe the 007 is one. Franchises like that where we're going, well, how can we retrofit this so that it is more actually like appropriate for what era we are in and what era we want to move into? Are there other properties out there that you're like, no, we could do better and have more women that are in these properties? And would you like to see any properties in general just have more females in them, just to see what it did to spice up that property?
Yes.
I'll take. Okay, you guys know this. Here's the one that I would give: The Fast and the Furious. Stop trying to talk The Rock into coming back into it. There's a lot of women that I would love to see in that because that's basically superhero movies as far as I'm concerned. I put them in the same boat, my same hat of a fan when I watch a Fast and the Furious movie as I do Star Wars, Star Trek, anything else. Here's the weird universe, the Pacific Rim, anything. They're superheroes. That's the only reason any of this stuff works. That's not how that only works in the Fast and the Furious world. And I'm cool with that because I buy into it. So why do we have to have so many dudes? And they're all cool dudes, but I just would like to have they could if they're gonna swap somebody else out, I'm like, you could swap more of that in, and I would love to see that franchise have more women in it. And I would go, yes, I would be here for that.
um, I think no, I agree. That would be cool.
Yeah.
I do think that with some of the established franchises, that they're almost like launch pads,
Hmm.
like with James Bond. I think that if they and I know the Fleming estate said there's not going to happen, but I think it'll be stronger instead of having James Bond become, Jamie Bond, to have like, oh, here's this new 007 or a 006, and she's introduced in a stronger film than No Time to Die.
Yep.
But like give it a good film where she has a chance to shine. And just like Fast and the Furious did that Hobbs and Shaw,
Yep.
like take that character and then like let them branch out using that franchise as a leap. So it's not so much continuing that franchise, but more like taking it over, but taking it a different direction.
Hmm.
But as far as straight franchises, and I know this feels like a cop out answer, I think genre wise,
Yes.
uh, slasher films
Okay.
are grossly lopsided.
Yes.
Because if you think about when you say, oh, someone's a horror movie fan, who do they probably like? Every list that you have is going to be, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, Pinhead, Chucky. You're going to have a long list of fellas.
Yes.
And then maybe some folks like, oh, I read Stephen King, so I really like Misery, or I liked Carrie. But those are one-offs. Even
Right.
on the softer side of horror, with things like, where's the female equivalent of a Hannibal Lecter,
Okay.
who's
Yes.
gotten, 3 movies and a really good TV series off
Right.
of just a handful of novels? There's no reason why we could, or Dexter,
Or
like people
Dexter.
are
Hmm.
like, there's no reason why we couldn't have either a supernatural slasher that was a woman, or have like the intellectual kind of creepy but still charismatic sociopathic serial killer a la Dexter and Hannibal Lecter that
Hmm.
was a woman.
Yes.
And there's no reason why that hasn't happened.
I think
Like,
the
or there's no
closest we've got
excuse.
is Killing Eve is the
Right.
closest I might be missing some other because that's not my primary fandom or is in that. But I get you. I get you. I could see that.
Yeah, it's just a huge opportunity, especially like when you get like Michelle Gomez
Yes.
as Missy is delicious, and that's almost like a Hannibal Lecter-esque. You just take it up a notch, but she could easily slide into a role where it's like, okay, so her thing is she's like instead of the gentleman thief, she's the you know refined lady murderer, or
Right.
and she's got the acting chops to pull it off. And it's just it's such a weird vacuum in such a huge genre. I mean, horror's been around since the beginning of film, but when usually it's a one-off where it's a femme fatale or again a Stephen King adaptation, but
Right.
there's so few and far between. And I mean, there's so many actors that could do it. I mean, Kathy Bates was amazing in Misery,
Mhm.
absolutely horrifying.
Absolutely.
And the nothing, but that's it. Like we get these one-offs, and then that's it.
Mhm.
So I'm going to admit that the first thing that jumped into my head was Stargate, followed shortly by Star Trek and Star Wars. And the classic question, which series is better, Star Trek or Star Wars? My answer is usually Stargate, just to remind people that it exists. Um,
Well done.
I think of the three of them, I actually think Star Wars does the best.
Hmm.
And I would love to see more females in the Star Trek and Stargate universe. I imagine the Stargate universe is probably not going to have any more things come out, but I can dream. Um, I did just rewatch all of Star Trek TNG. I have not seen very much of Discovery yet.
Hmm.
Um, I've loved Picard, and there are some really awesome females in
Right.
the Picard series. Looking forward to more of that. But can't we have female shows like where Deanna Troy got her commandership,
Hmm.
and what did she go and do? And Dr. Crusher became Captain Picard.
Hmm.
Um, can we
I like that mashup,
can
Natasha.
we have more stories
Yes.
um, about that side of the Star Trek universe? I
Right.
think that would be awesome.
And we've talked about Picard before, Taylor and I. Like, I really do. Like, I would be interested in a lot of. Let's watch Seven of Nine because she's who's the most interesting. Like, as much as I love Sir Jean Luc, I still am like, yeah, but I'm okay watching everybody else in this more than I am him. As much as I love him, I agree that I would follow a lot of those other characters more than I would him if I was given the choice. Hmm.
I mean, Star Trek's one of my babies.
Yes.
This is
Hmm.
who, but I do think they are doing better. Like the 21st century treks, like Discovery is very,
Discovery is.
very
Hmm.
woman centric and multiple types. So it's not just like the strong badass woman, but there's also like the kind of like nerdy woman, and then there's
Yes.
like this woman, and then there's like the nurturing woman, and so you have all these different female characters, and then we even get like non-binary characters.
Mhm.
So it's also like kind of moving away from that whole like man woman only options and moving into the more like, well, this is actually a spectrum. This is very fluid. There's no hard, and but that's all in Discovery. And then you move to
Right.
Lower Decks. Lower Decks is also extremely. I mean, the lead character is a woman, and then her mom is the captain of the ship, and that's great. Mariner and then Freeman, and they're fantastic. And that's like a different type of show. I mean, it's Star Trek, but it's more comedic for the
Right.
fans. But it's still like Mariner's rebellious, and she's kind of like what we used to see with like a sci-fi woman. But then her mom is almost like a female Jean-Luc Picard. She's very like diplomatic and refined, and like, oh, this shares gravitas. But there's other women characters like Devon Attendee's in that show, and then the newest one so far, Star Trek Prodigy, which is also animated but it's fantastic. Brings
Right.
back Kate Mulgrew, even though she's a hologram. Mild spoiler. Um, as Captain Janeway,
Yes.
and but there's other characters like Dodge, and oh, it's yeah, it's like Star Trek I think gets it as opposed to Star Wars, which I think Star Wars is
I
still
think, yeah.
suffering from like, well, we have a woman here, sort of like they did in the 80s, where it's like we
Right.
got Billy D. Williams, so now we have this is the one black guy in the galaxy, so
Very much so.
we're good. And I
Hmm.
think the same we got Leia,
Hmm.
and they're like, well, Leia's not enough, so then they had the prequels like, well, we got Padme,
Right.
And then they're like, well, now we have Ray.
All right.
And then they kind of introduce characters, but they don't flesh
And
them
then they
out. So it's sort
step
of
back.
like, right,
Right.
it's like
Step
it's
back.
Ray, and then it's like, who was that? Oh, was her name Kim, or
And then
what
we
was
didn't
it?
see her again.
Right, and then who
Hmm.
wasn't there like wasn't Laura Dern somebody? And who was like they have these flashes, but really they have like sort of like, well, since we have the one, that's all we can have. Even Mandalorian, which is a great show, it's sort of like we got Rosario Dawson as Asajj, or not Asajj. I don't know my Star Wars
Okay.
characters as
Hmm.
well.
Ahsoka.
Okay.
Ahsoka, thank you. And then we had the hate speech lady for a little
Yes.
bit. Um,
Speaking
but
of shows I'm looking forward to,
Hmm.
Ahsoka.
Ahsoka is gonna be great. And okay, so we're gonna start. I'm gonna gaslight Taylor for a second, Natasha. So feel free to jump in,
Okay.
and then we'll start wrapping up and find where tell everybody else where they can find us if they're in person or online. So, okay. Okay, everybody raise your hand who liked the first Wonder Woman film, the first Wonder Woman movie. Okay, now everybody put your hand down. Put your hand down if you disliked the second Wonder Woman movie, 1984. See? Okay, now look. This is the thing. Whenever we are having conversations about female driven properties, I use this as an example because this is why I want more movies. Because I, as a woman who likes these kind of movies, hated Wonder Woman 1984, but feel like I can't say that to a lot of people because they go see Wonder Woman. Female driven properties don't do well. And it's the movie, I don't hate it because it's a woman. I hate it because what they did with the character. And so that's why I want more films so that I can say I don't like that one and not have him turn it into, well, this is why we don't make movies with women as the lead. And Natasha, if you hadn't talked to Taylor about it, he is like the one of the two people in the universe that stands that movie. It's just my friend Taylor over there. Taylor, it's just you and your one friend. Who else likes that movie other than you?
there have been so many reviews in national publications of
That he
critics
all
who
wrote under a different pen name.
love this film. Because was it a great, like, was it the greatest superhero film? No, not at all. I mean, but was it a great Wonder Woman film? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because Jenkins and Godot know Wonder Woman. Like the story was not the strongest, and they definitely botched the third act. Like I guess Miles, we were still in spoiler warning territory. It's been a year, but with Cheetah and Maxwell Lord as the big bads, that's a fine dynamic. But they didn't give them enough to do. They didn't really know what to do with Cheetah. So the third act was, but they knew like that was Wonder Woman. Like
See,
that
and
was the
I
comic book come to
disagree.
life.
That's why I didn't like the film is I did not find that to be Wonder Woman. I didn't think that the interactions that she had with the other characters are what she would have done. Like, and specifically when she finds Barbara under duress and getting assaulted in the middle of the street, and then basically like saves her and goes, tap tap, see you at work tomorrow. I don't think that's what that character would do. I think the character would be a lot more, hey, let me make sure you got home. Because Natasha, if I saw you get assaulted in the hallway, I wouldn't be like, deuces, hopefully see you tomorrow. That just isn't how I thought that it really presented her and did her a disservice. I think that all of the work that they did in the first movie to give her agency, they took away in this one because it was not presented as she was making decisions from a position of logic, of training that she has had, of the upbringing that she had, as what the character was. I was disappointed in the way that they presented her because she came across as, I think there's a difference between coming across as em- having empathy for other people and then coming across as needy. And that's where I think that they crossed the line.
So I think that she came across very well as a classic made in the 1980s movies
Okay.
female character.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that some of my groups have talked about specifically in relation to Wonder Woman 84 is I think they did a really great job of making it actually seem like a 1980s movie.
Okay.
I
Okay.
also think they went a little too far with that.
Okay. Fair enough.
And that's a big part of the problem with that movie. There was so many scenes that I'm like, is this scene over yet? is this scene over yet?
Mhm.
And they weren't character developing. They weren't. One of my reactions after thinking on things for a very long time
Mhm.
is that I hope that Wonder Woman 1984 is like The Empire Strikes Back, necessary in order for the third movie to be even better and have the backstory of why she's like this and why she acts like that. But I think 1984 by itself didn't tell us much.
I love that concept, Natasha. I hope that you were correct, and that would be the thing. And one of these days, I'm sure Taylor and I'll do just a panel. I'm going to leave it on this. If they take the whole Steve Trevor cut, again, spoiler, take that whole through line out, I'm a happy camper.
Oh, I agree a
If
thousand
we
percent
take the
on that.
whole Steve Trevor concept character out of that film, just scalpel it out, I'm okay. I'm okay with most of the interactions that she would have with Barbara and as Cheetah. I can understand why that would do it. I think that those two characters could have had breathed more in a different direction and actually like built that out. And so that's what I'm saying. And Taylor, I promise, as one of my resolutions in 2022, we're still early in it. It's January. I am not going to pick on you all year about. Oh, I'm
No,
gonna release
it's
it to the universe. Is that
I
okay? I'll
I
stop picking on you about that.
I love it. I love it because it gives me a chance to keep talking about 84. But no, but the one tiny thing I'll throw out there is that
Hmm.
I give them credit because they were definitely working with this. I mean, you've got 7 decades of mythology with Wonder
Yes.
Woman to work for, and they are jumping around. Like there's definitely some golden era mixed in there. There's some silver age. There's some 90s. There's a little bit of New 52 from the characters, and they're kind of mashing it together. I think with 84, they're trying to fit it, and this sounds like an excuse, but I do think they're trying to fit it in the timeline because it's all in the Snyderverse. Because
Right.
in Wonder Woman in 2017, she's naive, or at least not naive, idealistic. She
Right.
believes in the goodness of man, and she realizes that beautiful scene with Ares where she's like, oh, like no, mankind's kind of terrible,
Yep.
but I'm gonna save them anyway, and which is straight out of the comics. Like
Right.
Wonder Woman's like, yeah, the land of man is terrible, but what are you gonna do?
Exactly.
But I think in order for her to get to the point where she was in Batman v Superman, where we first met her chronologically in the films, where she's kind of like, I'm done. I'm not doing Wonder Woman stuff anymore. I'm just going to hang out in my museum. I think it needs to be a gradual progression. And I think that's where they shot themselves. That's the one thing I'll give them. I don't think it should have taken place in the 80s because
Okay.
that's a huge jump going from World War One to 1984. There's so much that happened where, I
Yes.
mean, if it was just World War II, another period piece, and then she sees what America does to Japan and says, you know what, I'm done with humans.
Fair
Everyone would be like,
enough.
yeah, yep, makes sense. We drop nukes on other people. Yeah, I would be done with this too.
Yeah.
I think 84, it's kind of like, well, so you're upset because you found out that people in the 80s were greedy? That
Right.
again, that's that third act, that flaw where I'm like, oh, like, so this is why she's not hanging out with humans anymore, is because
Because they're greedy.
you're,
Right.
you're just now figuring this out.
Right. Right. Well, overall, as we start to wrap up this particular panel and the future is female, um, what could we, as we are relaying, because we've all agreed that we would like to see more of these kind of things, as we are evangelizing this concept, do you think that there's some ways that we can do a better job of evangelizing it? And are there ways that we can also talk to our additional allies and arm them with some information on how do you have this conversation with somebody that says, well, I don't like women movies. I don't like female driven movies.
One of the things that my groups of friends do, and granted that's been a little harder the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
is um, if it's a strong female lead movie, and we will do our darndest to go see it
Right.
opening weekend. Um, in the case of Black Widow, for example, um, we weren't ready to go to theaters, but we paid for that pre whatever they called it on Disney Plus so that we could uh, add to the yes, give us more of this. We are throwing money at this. If you have the means to throw money, get the numbers up, get out there and watch the films and drag your friends with you, even if they're like, whatever. A whole group of us is going. Come
Right.
too. Let's
Fair
go.
enough. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's really it. Is As individuals, we need to just go out and support the content. And I'll also add the addendum that if you can't find it, then make it. And
Okay.
that's,
Hmm.
I mean, one of the reasons I write what I write is because I couldn't find those stories in terms of sci-fi books. I was like, I'm not finding what I'm looking for, so I'm gonna write it myself. It's a little bit trickier with TV and movies, but still, like, there's the indie circuit, and then the second part, we'll see with that is because Hollywood is a lot of things, but
Yes.
first and foremost, they are greedy.
Yes.
Like if they see something is making money, they will put more money into it and put more content out
Correct.
in a similar vein.
Hmm.
Period. Like if for some reason like someone put out a Netflix movie of like a kid banging a spoon, then you'll see other studios put out kid
Absolutely.
banging spoon movies. So
Mhm.
the more we can support, and that does mean we have to see some that maybe not might not be so great,
Right.
but it's again it's that just get into the big picture. And then I think second is kind of like what Natasha was saying is just word of mouth. It's as geeks especially we love to trash the stuff we don't like or the
Yes.
things we find wrong. We harsh the squee
Yeah.
or we squash the squee so much where it's like if something's cool, that's pretty much always say, oh, this is awesome, and that's about it.
Yep.
Whereas if something we don't like it, we'll write, essays and manifestos about why this movie was the worst movie that was ever made and everyone involved in it should be like exiled. And I think we need to like maybe invert that dynamic where if we don't like something, it's like, yeah, you know what? I saw that wasn't for me. But
Hmm.
if you see a movie, especially a movie that centers female characters, that's written very well and acted very well, or has strong women in the cast and that kind of thing, that's where we need to be writing the big super long Facebook post and blowing up Twitter. It was like, oh my God, have you seen this? It's so great
Right.
because XYZ. And like, oh my God, you got to check out this scene without spoiling it, of course, but just
Yes.
more than just like, so awesome, check it out. Because that message, it's like, well, obviously, if you just gave me 5,000 words about why this movie sucked,
Yes.
that's entertaining and funny, that negative review. I might want to check that out more so than someone saying like thumbs up, so awesome, really
Right.
cool. Like that doesn't really tell me anything. Not me, but like in the example, the collective me, in the
Right.
example. So like, don't. I guess that's my suggestion is just to get as excited about the stuff you do like, especially when there are women in prominent roles or prominent characters, as you do about the stuff you don't like.
I agree. I agree. I think those are both wonderful suggestions from you, Taylor, and also from you, Natasha. So we have a variety of virtual panels that you can find if you go to console-room.com. You can find that. You can get links to our Discord channel, so you can be part of the community and do all of those things. And where else do you want to give them your website and everything, Taylor?
Yes, I'm at BLKINTL, Black Intellectual, missing some vowels, but still has one or two in there, .com. You can find me on the Facebook and the Twitters. I'm all over the place. Or see me at Council Room. I'm on a whole bunch of panels. Come say hi.
Yes, and so I'm on a number of those panels with Taylor as well. You can also go to my website. It's missshannon.com, Shannon with an A. Natasha, is there anything else that we need to remind them about Console Room 2022 Satellite 9?
Well, if you are joining us in person, remember to follow all of our wonderful policies. Masks on, except when you're in designated eating places. But besides that, I mean, because of that, that's why I'm willing to go, is because we have the mask policy in place. Um, if you're joining us virtually, thank you for doing so. We've got some pre-recorded stuff, we've got some live stuff, and it's going to be really exciting. If you want to find me, I'll probably be in main stage behind the computer, sending out those streams.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this virtual panel. The future is female, and we will see you during more of Console Room 2022.